Okay, this is the second part to the lesson 4.04 video, and let's keep reading. Better Living Through Science. In the 1930s, Americans had become accustomed to scarcity. In the 1950s, many began to think they might acquire practically anything they desired. For millions of working class and middle class Americans, everyday life in the 1950s was comfortable and prosperous. Applied science seemed capable of delivering every good thing imaginable, from nonstick cookware to frozen dinners to a cure for the dreaded disease of polio. Decades after Thomas Edison first electrified lower Manhattan, cables now carried electricity to virtually every American home. Families filled their homes with electrical appliances like washer, dryers, and refrigerators and electric toothbrushes. Especially for women at home, universal electricity lightened some age-old burdens of exhausting housework. With the flick of a switch, a housewife could clean the carpet or pulverize the garbage. During World War II, both Allied and Axis governments had invested heavily in scientific and technological research. Many of the advances made for the war effort continued to be used and improved upon in the United States after the war. Natural rubber, which grew only in tropical climates, was replaced by synthetic rubber in the manufacture of tires. The magnetron, which generates electrical and magnetic currents, was used in the war to improve sonar performance in submarines and eventually led to microwave ovens. Radar and jet engines transformed air travel. In medicine, Jonas Salk's vaccine research helped eliminate polio. Wartime research led to the mass production of penicillin, the first antibiotic, which had been in precious short supply since it was discovered by the Scottish scientist Alexander Fleming in 1928. The mass production of penicillin helped save many wounded soldiers from death by infection, and the antibiotic has saved millions of lives since. One of the most important government-funded innovations came out of World War II was the computer. During the war, a British mathematician named Alan Turing led the design of an early computing machine that allowed British intelligence officers to break the German secret military codes. Early computers were huge, clunky machines that performed calculations and processed information electronically. And here we go, one of the first computers here filling a whole room. After the invention of transistors, tiny devices that control the flow of electric current, and the development of other miniature electronic equipment allowed computers to become smaller, quicker, and more reliable. Nevertheless, in the 1950s and 60s, a small computer was still big enough to fill a room. By the 1950s, a company called IBM, International Business Machines, emerged as the leading computer manufacturer. These early computers were used mainly by the government and the military. It would take another generation to create personal computers for homes and offices. And let's read this here. Credit drives spending. The post-war spending boom was fueled in part by readily available consumer credit. Consumer credit had been a common fact of American life since the 1920s. But in the post-war era, working class and middle class families became increasingly comfortable with the cycle of borrowing and spending that allowed even earners of modest wages to fill their homes with luxuries that would have been unthinkable during the Depression and World War II. In the 1960s and 70s, the number of people with Bank America cards, later renamed Visa cards, and MasterCharge cards, later named MasterCard, skyrocketed from 7 million to 59 million. The influence of television. A rare status symbol in the 40s, in the 50s, a TV became an indispensable feature of the American home, an entertainer, a babysitter, a talking substitute for the farmhouse hearth. As early as 1939, David Sarnoff, president of the Radio Corporation of America, RCA, introduced television to the American public by broadcasting programs from the World's Fair in New York City, including a telecast of President Franklin D. Roosevelt opening the fair. Sarnoff hoped to broadcast a lineup of television programs in 1941, but World War II interrupted his plans. RCA, Westinghouse, and other companies dropped everything to manufacture equipment for the war effort. After the war, RCA and its radio and television subsidiary, the National Broadcasting Company, NBC, launched network TV programs such as the Kraft Television Theater, which featured different dramas every week, and Kukla, Fran and Ollie, a popular show that featured puppets. Even though most people did not own television sets in the late 40s, they were curious about the invention. They often stood outside store windows and watched the black and white images moving on the screens. Others gathered around boxy sets in their neighbors' living rooms. The glow of a television screen worked almost like an ancient campfire to draw people together. As television sets became more affordable, more and more people bought them. In 1946, about 7,000 American homes had TVs. By 1950, there were 10 million TV sets in the United States. By the end of the 50s, 90% of American households owned a television, and most families spent their evenings watching it. People turned to television for news and educational programs, though network officials quickly learned that most viewers craved entertainment. National networks and local stations turned popular radio shows into TV programs. They broadcast comedies, westerns, and sporting events. Now viewers could see what they had once only been able to hear. They laughed at comedian Lucille Ball's predicaments on I Love Lucy. And here's a picture of Lucy and Ricky from the famous TV show I Love Lucy here on the left. Thrilled to Western adventures on Gunsmoke and cheered for their favorite baseball teams, all from the comfort of their living rooms. Variety shows and soap operas were favorites of many viewers. Programs such as The Ed Sullivan Show featured a variety of entertainment, singing, dancing, short comedy sketches, juggling, and more that the whole family could enjoy. Soap operas, which had begun in the era of radio, were so named because soap companies such as Procter & Gamble often sponsored the shows. Television spreads social norms. And here's a picture of a character from Gunsmoke. The family TV, at first black and white and later color, was not only a symbol of affluence. It also spread the idea that affluence was now the American norm, the standard for judging one's life. Some of the most popular TV shows presented a land of plenty, made up of well-dressed, well-fed, happy families living in tree-lined suburban streets with shiny new cars parked in their garages. Shows like Ozzie and Harriet and Leave It to Beaver presented a squeaky clean picture of middle-class American life, with a specific family structure assumed as the ideal. In the idealized TV family, mother could afford to stay at home with the kids, although many real American mothers had to work for pay. And in this happy family, as the title of one long-running show put it, father knows best. Once the TV networks reached a mass audience, they sought to avoid offending viewers with challenging or thought-provoking shows. A program that displeases any substantial segment of the population is a misuse of advertising dollars, one advertiser said. The newsman Edward R. Murrow asked if, just occasionally, television program might go beyond selling soap, cigarettes, and automobiles to informing a troubled, apprehensive, but receptive public. The car culture. If television changed the way people spent time inside their homes, the automobile changed what they did outside. With the rise of suburbs, many people lived farther from their jobs and needed transportation. Automobile manufacturers, freed from the restrictions of wartime production, met the need by producing cars in record numbers. They also used plenty of advertising, including catchy TV ads, to convince consumers that they needed a shiny new car every 2 years. In 1946, American auto manufacturers produced 2 million cars. In 1955, almost 8 million. The percentage of families who owned a car jumped from 59% in 1950 to 70% just 5 years later. The cars of the 50s were more than a means of getting from one place to another. They were a sign of affluence, a status symbol. Every year, manufacturers introduced new models, largely unchanged in performance and engineering, but sporting new colors and body styles. For while it seemed that with each passing year, cars sprouted bigger and bigger tail fins, decorative wing-like additions on the rear fenders. And here's a picture over here on the left of a tail fin. Chrome glistened on bumpers and doors. Station wagons accommodated growing suburban families. Every teenage boy longed to have a car of his own. Couples and families drove their cars to the new drive-in restaurants. Pull into a parking space, lean out the window, and place an order through a two-way speaker. And in minutes the food is delivered to the car, sometimes by servers on roller skates, on trays that attach the car door with the window rolled down. In fields and on the edges of towns, drive-in movie theaters sprang up. Park the car, attach a speaker to the door, and peer through the windshield at the movie projected on a huge outdoor screen. And here's a picture of a drive-in movie. Few people considered the environmental consequences of the new car culture. As advertising fueled the demand for new automobiles, thousands of cars were junked each year. With cheap gas readily available, no one worried about fuel efficiency. When the weather was nice, many families for a weekend fun would bundle into the car and take a leisurely Sunday drive into the country. Building the interstate highways. When President Dwight D. Eisenhower took office in 1953, most of his attention initially went to dealing with Cold War tensions and resolving the Korean War. Even so, in his first State of the Union address in January 1954, Eisenhower called for Congress to take action to improve the nation's highways. A safe and adequate highway system, he said, was a matter of national security, important to protect the vital interest of every citizen. Most of the nation's roads were 1 or 2 lanes wide, in shabby condition, and jammed with cars and trucks. Eisenhower envisioned a system of superhighways to connect the nation. During World War II, he had seen such highways in Germany and appreciated the advantage they gave in moving troops and equipment. The creation of a modern interstate highway system would be the most significant domestic achievement of Eisenhower's presidency. In June 1956, Congress passed the Federal Aid Highway Act. It called for the expansion of a network of interstate highways, with construction to be paid for largely by an increase on the federal tax on gasoline. The construction of the interstate highway system amounted to the largest public works program in the nation's history. In his memoirs, Eisenhower looked back and reflected on the scope of the program. And here is just a map of the interstate highway system. Okay, more than any single action by the government since the end of the war, one would change the face of America. Its impact on the nation's economy, the jobs it would produce in manufacturing and construction, the rural areas it would open up was beyond calculation. The interstate highways, eventually comprising nearly 50,000 miles of high-speed pavement, helped unite the country and made travel far easier for commerce and leisure alike. The country's vastly expanded road system gave rise to a new transit culture. Roadside motels proliferated in the 50s and breathed new life into the nation's tourism industry. Not all effects of the new highways were positive. The highways increased the country's reliance on automobiles that, before the days of emission controls, poured tons of pollutants into the air. Where there were roads, suburbs grew and inner cities declined. Interstate highways also disrupted life in many small towns. Highways were built through the countryside, often parallel to older roads. This meant that travelers no longer drove through the towns that dotted the old routes and no longer stopped at local restaurants, hotels, or gas stations, which forced many of these businesses to close. Chain motels such as Holiday Inn and chain restaurants like Howard Johnson's sprang up across the country, usually where two interstates bisected. The chains were predictable, and people knew what to expect when they stopped. But traveling Americans no longer experienced regional differences in food and architecture. A hamburger and fries in New England tasted like the same in Santa Fe. Yet another way in which American culture was becoming more uniform. And we look at the picture here of the interstate highway system, just some random interstate. And let's read about the fast food nation. In 1954, Ray Kroc, an enterprising entrepreneur who sold milkshake mixers, stumbled upon a small hamburger stand in San Bernardino, California, owned by two brothers, Dick and Mac McDonald. Kroc saw a quickly moving line of happy customers being served efficiently by the McDonald brothers' assembly line system of food preparation. The brothers had opened a few restaurants, but Kroc convinced them to let him spread McDonald's franchises around the country, capitalizing on the public's desire for a quick and reliable place to eat while driving the open road. McDonald's became especially popular with young couples who could not afford to take their toddlers to a more expensive restaurant. By the late 1970s, McDonald's, dubbed by Time magazine the burger that conquered the country, had more than 3,000 different franchise locations. And who knows what they are at today? That's the late 70s. I can only imagine what they're at today. Okay, so that's where we're going to stop for this lesson's reading. Let's go back to our lesson and make sure that you've checked your reading guide and your lesson answer key, that you've got the correct information, and continue on. Do you know what? Oh, I think I skipped. Do you know what life was like in the 50s? Take a few moments to glance at the United States in the 50s. Click Affluent Society and watch a show at the drive-in theater. Okay, so here's the pop-up, the Affluent Society. And it'll take you through a little program. You can watch that. It'll be fun and neat to see that. And then we have to take the virtual trip to Levittown and complete the sheet. So have you ever visited a suburb full of houses that look the same? Why was that? Where did the idea of creating cookie cutter houses originate? And you'll read about William Levitt and Levittown. And we're almost done with this, so I just wanted to quickly show you, whoops, And don't forget, so finish filling that, look at the site, and then don't forget to complete your 4.04 checkpoint as well. Good luck!